So questions around handling conflict are pretty common in today's jobs interviews, and in today's video I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective on how you should probably go about answering these types of questions. Let's take a classic example. So if you're getting asked the question of how do you handle conflict, for example, in your team, you would basically prepare this in advance with a star answer about a situation where two of your colleagues didn't get along, and you would basically call up a meeting with each one of them. You would ensure that you would listen to whatever every one of them had to say. Then you also look at some facts, probably also called the manager and had a couple of meetings, and eventually successfully resolved the situation, and they became best friends, right? And you would add all the relevant information that would be needed for you to give the best possible answer on how do you handle conflict that would showcase you as a very skillful person with these things. Now, the question is this: do you have to be a great conflict handler to be good in the role that you're applying for? Because the problem is this: in order to become a great conflict handler, you must practice conflict. You must get good with these things, right? So if you had to get good with these things, it means you had many conflicts in your workplace. Then chances are you started some of these conflicts, right? Because it's not always that others start conflicts if you handle some of these. So you must be on both sides of the story to become good at handling conflict. And if you'd be applying for an HR role or a director level or a manager level role, yes, conflict is part of your job, right? But if you're applying for a software development engineer, are you supposed to be a great conflict handler? Applying, and especially talking in a job interview, are you supposed to give an extraordinary example of how you handle conflict inside your team? I would argue that it's not necessarily to your advantage, because that would require you to be skillful with these things, which might send the wrong message to your employer that you're that type of personality who easily builds conflict around them. I'm not saying it will build this image of you, but I'm saying that you should carefully consider on how good you want to showcase yourself at handling conflict versus the type of role you're applying for, because a software development engineer is not supposed to manage the workplace, right? To handle conflict situations in the workplace. Of course, you did it every now and then, but from here to be proficient with these things and to showcase this as a skill in a job interview, I believe that's not necessarily to you going into job interview. And this is not only for software development engineers, maybe even for salespeople. Even as a salesperson, you're not supposed to handle conflict in the workplace. Maybe something secondary or even third place, but by no means you should be good with these things. So all in all, I believe here that the main takeaway here is that unless you're applying for a role that requires you to be good at handling conflict in the workplace, I'd very much prefer going with a more subtle answer, even a generic answer if you want, but I'd rather keep it towards the 1 or 2 minute threshold as compared to the 10-minute threshold. I wouldn't necessarily develop too much, because this discussion is, if the role you're applying for doesn't apply, this is not to your advantage, in my opinion. It doesn't talk about the core the core strengths that you must have for these types of jobs. So hopefully you found this useful.